Hi, I will be recording the audio for Monster Walter Dean Myers, pages 7 through 16. Page 7, Monster, Monday, July 6th. Monster. Fade in, interior, early morning in cell, Block D, Manhattan Detention Center. Camera goes slowly down grim gray corridor. There are sounds of inmates yelling from cell to cell. Much of it is obscene. Most of the voices are clearly black or Hispanic. Camera stops and slowly turns toward a cell. Interior cell. 16-year-old Steve Harmon sitting on the edge of a metal cot, head in hands. He is thin, brown skinned. On the cot next to him are the suit and tie he is to wear to court for the start of his trial. Cut to Ernie, another prisoner, sitting on John, pants down. Cut to Sunset, another prisoner, pulling on t-shirt. Cut to Steve, pulling blanket over his head as screen goes dark. Page 8, voiceover, VO. Ain't no use putting a blanket over your head, man. You can't cut this out. This is reality. This is the real deal. VO continues with anonymous prisoner, explaining how the detention center is the real thing. As he does, words appear on the screen just like the opening credit of the movie Star Wars, rolling from the bottom of the screen and shrinking until they are a blur on the top of the screen before rolling off into space. Monster, the story of my miserable life. Starring Steve Harmon, produced by Steve Harmon, directed by Steve Harmon. Credits continue to roll. The incredible story of how one guy's life was turned around by a few events and how he might spend the rest of his life behind bars. Told as it actually happened. Page 10. Written and directed by Steve Harmon, featuring Sandra Petroselli as a dedicated prosecutor, Kathy O'Brien as a defense attorney with doubts, James King as a thug, Richard Bobo Evans as the rat, Osvaldo Cruz, member of the Diablos, as the tough guy wannabe, Laurel Henry as the witness, Jose Delgado, he found the body, and starring 16-year-old Steve Harmon as the boy on trial for murder. Page 11. Filmed at the Manhattan Detention Center. Set design, handcuffs, and prison outfits by the state of New York. VO. Yo, Harmon, you gonna eat something? Come on and get your breakfast, man. I'll take your eggs if you don't want them. You want them? Steve, subdued. I'm not hungry. Sunset. His trial starts today. He up for the big one. I know how that feels. Cut to interior, corrections department van. Through the bars at the rear of the van, we see people going about the business of their lives in downtown New York. There are men collecting garbage, a female traffic officer monitoring for a taxi to make a turn, students on the way to school. Few people notice the van as it makes its way from the detention center to the courthouse. Page 12. Cut to prisoners. Handcuffed, coming from back of van. Steve is carrying a notebook. He is dressed in a suit and tie we saw on the cot. He is seen only briefly as he is herded through the heavy doors of the courthouse. Fade out as last prisoner from the van enters rear of courthouse. Fade in, interior courthouse. We are in a small room used for prisoner lawyer interviews. A guard sits at a desk behind Steve. Kathy O'Brien, Steve's lawyer, is petite, red-haired, and freckled. She is all business as she talks to Steve. O'Brien, let me make sure you understand what's going on. Both you and this King character are on trial for felony murder. Felony murder is as serious as it gets. Sandra Petroselli is the prosecutor, and she's good. They're pushing for the death penalty, which is really bad. The jury might think they're doing you a big favor by giving you life in prison. So you better take this trial very, very seriously. Page 13. When you're in court, you sit there and you pay attention. You let the jury know that you think the case is as serious as they do. You don't turn and wave to any of your friends. It's all right to acknowledge your mother. I have to go and talk to the judge. The trial will begin in a few minutes. Is there anything you want to ask me before it starts? Steve, you think we're going to win? O'Brien, seriously? It probably depends on what you mean by win. Cut to interior, holding room. We see Steve sitting at one end of the bench. Against the opposite wall, dressed in a sloppy-looking suit, is 23-year-old James King, the other man on trial. King looks older than 23. He looks over at Steve with a hard look as we see Steve look away. Two guards sit at a table away from the prisoners who are handcuffed. The camera finds, page 14, the guards in a medium shot. They have their breakfast in aluminum takeout trays that contain eggs, sausage, and potatoes. A black female stenographer pours coffee for herself and the guards. Stenographer, I hope this case lasts 2 weeks. I can sure use the money. Guard 1, 6 days, maybe 7. It's a motion case. They go through the motions, then they lock them up. Turns and looks off camera towards Steve. Ain't that right, Bright Eyes? Cut to Steve, who is seated on a low bench. He is handcuffed to a U-bolt put in the bench for that purpose. Steve looks away from the guard. Cut to door. It opens and court clerk looks in. Page 15. Court clerk. 2 minutes. Cut to guards who hurriedly finish breakfast. Stenographer takes machine into courtroom. They unshackle Steve and take him toward door. Cut to Steve is made to sit down at one table. At another table, we see King and 2 attorneys. Steve sits alone. A guard stands behind him. There are 1 or 2 spectators in the court. Then 4 more enter. Close up. See you. Of Steve Harmon. The fear is evident on his face. MS. People are getting ready for the trial to begin. Kathy O'Brien sits next to Steve. O'Brien, how are you doing? Steve, I'm scared. O'Brien, good, you should be. Anyway, just remember what we've been talking about. The page 16, judge is going to rule on the motion that King Sawyer made to suppress Cruz's testimony and a few other things. Steve, let me tell you what my job is here. My job is to make sure the law works for you as well as against you, and to make you a human being in the eyes of the jury. Your job is to help me. Any questions you have, write them down and I'll try to answer them. What are you doing there? Steve, I'm writing this whole thing down as a movie. O'Brien, whatever, make sure you pay attention. Close attention. VO, court guard. All rise. The judge enters and sits behind the bench. He is tall and thin. He pushes his fingers through whips of white hair and looks over the courtroom before sitting.